Welcome to the Pooch Parenting Podcast, a podcast for parents with dogs. I'm Michelle Stern, a certified professional dog trainer, mom, and former teacher. Living with kids and dogs at the same time can feel like a circus. I know because I lived it too. Join us as we interview a variety of experts and parents to discuss topics that will make parenting with dogs easier, safer, and less chaotic. Also, you can love living with your dog again. I'll always keep it real, which might even mean that you hear the messiness of life in the background on occasion, but at least you know you're not alone. Inside this episode of the Pooch Parenting Podcast, I'm going to dive into a topic that many parents face, which is what to do when your toddler or young child is too rough with the family dog. So maybe you've caught your little one pulling the dog's tail, giving enthusiastic hugs, or maybe climbing on your dog like they're a jungle gym or a big comfy chair. And you love your child and you love your dog, but you're worried about how these interactions might affect their safety and their bond. Maybe even your dog is growled, which has given you cause for concern. But the good news is rough behavior is a very common phase of childhood. And with the right strategies, you can help your child to learn how to interact with your dog in gentle, safe, and positive ways. Inside this episode, we're going to explore why rough behavior between your child and dog can happen, how to set your child and dog up for success, and what to do if your child gets a little bit too rough. So whether you're feeling overwhelmed or just looking for tips to make life smoother for your family, you are in the right place. When we begin this conversation, I'd like to start with just a little bit of discussion about why your child might be rough with your dog in the first place. And that usually begins with a misunderstanding of how the dog is feeling or if the dog is having a good time. So sometimes little kids don't realize that a dog uses their body to convey how they're feeling. And if the dog is uncomfortable, a young child won't be able to recognize those body signals. And so if your child, tugs on your dog's tail or starts playing with your dog's silky ears or starts to climb on the dog, hug the dog too tightly, try to pick up the dog, etc., they may not be able to recognize the fact that the dog is not having the best time. And some dogs don't have a bad time, but they sometimes change their mind about how well the interaction is going midway through. So maybe the dog doesn't mind if your child is reading a book and leans on them, but then maybe your child shifts position and touches on a part of the dog's body that's sensitive due to arthritis, or maybe they pinch a dog's toe, for example. And so their body language may shift quite suddenly so that it's so quick that maybe you or your child doesn't even notice that the dog is not comfortable anymore and wishes that the behavior, this kind of negative interaction, would end. Also, parents don't necessarily realize that kids typically lack impulse control, right? Often until they're 25 years old. I'm sorry to break the news to you. That's when the prefrontal cortex is fully developed. So it is very normal for young children to be in a developmental stage where they are experimenting and exploring. I like to think of kids as little scientists where they test the boundaries and they always do things to see what the consequence may be. What will happen if I poke the dog in the eye? What will happen if I stick my finger in the dog's nostrils? Wow, that tail looks fun. Maybe I can pull it, right? So what we have to do oftentimes as parents is we have to sort of set the stage. Not only do we have to model appropriate behavior from our end of things, but we also need to step in and we need to say, you know what, I can't let you do these things. And so that means that we need to use sometimes management or other physical boundaries such as baby gates and pens to help us to manage our child who moves so fast in our household, right? Parents are often surprised when their babies become mobile at how quickly they can move through the house. And your dog is adorable, and your child knows your dog is adorable. And so they often want to interact with your dog. And if you have your back turned, even for a second, sometimes your child is over at your dog before you even know it, maybe leaning on them, maybe grabbing them. And that can be really hard on a dog who's sensitive or anxious or ouchy with arthritis or tired or resting. A lot of dogs just don't want to be bothered, right? So those are a number of reasons why sometimes this behavior can happen. Now, rough handling of dogs is a problem for a lot of reasons, some of which are pretty obvious, but I'm going to state them here anyway, just to be really clear with you. We have risks, right? There are risks that the dog will growl, snap, bite your child, which of course could physically harm your child, which would be terrible. It can also damage trust between the dog and child. It can impact how safe your child feels around your dog, and it can impact how safe your dog feels around your child. Did I just say that? How safe your child feels around the dog and how safe the dog feels around the child. Both of those, right? So we want to make sure that we are trying to set up your kids and dogs to have a really strong, trusting bond over time, and not to have a bond that is damaged because the dog doesn't feel safe or the dog is expressing its discomfort and then your child no longer feels safe. Now, one thing just to mention is that if we react in a really extreme way, which is very normal, by the way, we run over, no, or stop it, or bad dog, or things like that. Sometimes those are instinctive behaviors. We can scare the dog even more, and we can scare your child even more, right? Sometimes such an extreme reaction out of us might make our dog think the child is something they really need to fear and be worried about. And that is not the kind of reaction that we're trying to promote in our dog. So if it's at all possible, try to react calmly. Thank the dog. Wow, you look pretty stressed. Let me help you. Move your child away, right? The calmer you are during these kinds of interactions, the more you can support your dog into not thinking your child is a threat, and the more you can support your child in coming up with an alternate behavior that they can do instead. We also don't want the child to freak out because of the dog's reaction. And we need to help the child over time. This is a very long, slow process, making better choices. Now, I want to encourage you not to trust your dog, and I want to encourage you not to trust your child. They're not going to be capable of making good choices. And your dog has every right to have a big response if they're uncomfortable. Because if we're ignoring how their body language is telling us they're feeling, then they're going to escalate their response. So if they're looking surprised, or they're giving their child side eye, or they're yawning or licking their lips or trying to leave, and we don't recognize those things, your dog may escalate to a growl or even a bite. So we need your dog to feel supported in those types of situations so they can look to you for support instead of feeling like they need to take matters into their own hands. Now, again, there are a lot of ways to set our toddlers and young kids up for success around dogs. I mentioned some of these before. Separation is a really big one. If you're not really sitting in between your dog and child, you're not super paying attention. Maybe you're busy doing all the millions of tasks that are involved with parenting. Maybe you're just trying to relax, put your feet up, scroll on your phone, make dinner, fold laundry, do whatever. Then using barriers like baby gates or playpens might be a good strategy so that you can actually do the task at hand without worrying that you don't have eyeballs on the back of your head, right? Supervision is something that is often misunderstood. And sometimes parents call me or book an emergency appointment and say, oh my gosh, my dog bit my child, often in the face, especially toddlers. Dogs' mouths and toddler height are often at the same level. Sometimes parents are just so upset because the dog seems really uncomfortable around their child. And oftentimes they'll say, this happened while I was in that room. I was right there, right? When this happened. I can't believe it happened. I was sitting right there and I still couldn't respond in time, right? So supervision is not the same as not leaving kids and dogs alone together. It goes way deeper than that, right? You need to really be participating in the activities that they are doing together. It means putting your body between your dog and your child. So for example, if you want to have a movie night, you could sit on the couch with your toddler on one side of you and your dog on the other side of you. That's a safe, supervised interaction. It can be calm. You can reward everybody for making good choices, right? And your body is in between them so that you can prevent your toddler from reaching over and yanking on your dog's really soft fur, for example, right? I like to really also focus on teaching about safe spaces. So what I mean by that is often that we will teach our children that if a dog is on their bed, if the dog is in a crate, if the dog is on the sofa, that the dog needs to be left alone. They are off limit. Dogs need to be respected when they are resting or chewing a bone or whatever. So it is really important that we help our children. We model this over and over and over again. Oh, the dog is resting. We're going to leave the dog alone, right? Now, again, you can't trust your toddler to remember that rule because the dog is cute and the dog looks so soft and your child wants to pet the dog. So sometimes I'll even encourage my clients to put a pen around the dog's favorite chair where they're resting, or a pen around the dog's bed. Older children, you can use strategies such as putting up visual barriers like poster boards, or putting a blue painter's tape on the floor around a chair and say, oh no, you can't cross the hot lava. The dog is in there and you're not allowed to cross it or you're going to get burned, right? So older kids can have a better imagination and they really like stories to help them remember what the rules are. But toddlers can't remember things like that. And they don't have the same affiliation to cool stories and warnings like that. Like, oh, we can't cross the fake train tracks. We can't cross the fake road. We can't cross the hot lava. Toddlers don't really know what that means. So we really have to use physical barriers to help prevent them. So those are just a few examples of setting them up for success around each other, but really actively creating these safe spaces to prevent an accident from happening. Now, you need to manage your own expectations, right? It is really important for you to have realistic boundaries about what your dog can handle, right? If your dog is older, if your dog is sick, they're not going to be patient as much as maybe a young, healthy dog who loves your children more than life itself. I don't want to encourage you to expect that your dog is going to, quote, tolerate your child. I mean, yes, of course, we all kind of want your dog to tolerate your child, but I think tolerate your child is a big ask. We want your dog to be happy, and they shouldn't have to put up with things your kids dish out. That's just disrespectful and rude. We do want your dog to be polite, but if we're concerned that your dog might not be able to be polite because they don't feel good, or they're tired, or they're sleeping, or they're eating, then we need to step in. We need to be realistic about the boundaries and what we can expect from our dog. And we need to say, let me help you not mess this up. I'm going to put you behind a barrier so that you can't have a big reaction when my child is just being a regular kid, right? You need to avoid placing your dog in situations where rough handling might happen. So one thing that is really helpful, again, and I mentioned this before, is that we really do need to model for toddlers and young kids how to be gentle with dogs. And ways that we can do that, we can read books to our children. You're probably reading bedtime stories anyway. I have some favorites in there linked in the show notes. They include Tails Are Not for Pulling, Hands Are Not for Hitting, and another one that's very cute called Love Me Gently. These are great books that, again, will reiterate the importance of using gentle hands, using our body gently around our dog. And we can practice those kinds of safe interactions by, using stuffed animals to practice that. You can put the child's hand on your hand when you're petting. Model that soft petting. If your child is still in that phase where they're really gripping, then they will grip your hand instead of the dog's coat, for example. So you take the brunt of their scratching or pulling as opposed to the dog taking the brunt of those kinds of interactions. I love role playing with kids. I think it's really fun. And I do love having very clear and consistent rules. We don't hug the dog. We don't climb on the dog. We don't poke the dog. We don't pull the dog's ears, etc. Having clarity is much easier. Now, one thing to say, though, is if you say to the dog, no hugging, what they're going to hear is hugging, right? So instead, I want you to kind of tweak those rules. Your rule may be no hugging the dog, but what I want you to express to your child is what they're allowed to do. We can pet the dog gently 2 times, and then we walk away. That is clear. That's not going to plant the word hugging into their brain when we're asking them not to do something like that, because we have to recognize the developmental stage that your toddler's brain is in, and what are they going to hear may not be what you're intending for them to hear. So for example, if you say, do not climb on the dog, they're going to hear climb on the dog. So instead we want to say, let's have all 4 of our limbs, let's put our hands and feet on the floor when we are near the dog. We can sit, have your bottom on the floor next to the dog, as opposed to climbing on top of the dog. Of course, dogs are not furniture. No dog appreciates being treated as a piece of furniture, and we need to really model that kind of respect. We also do have to kind of keep in mind what we are doing when our children are watching. So if you grab your dog by the cheeks and give them a big smooch on the nose, guess who else is going to do that exact same behavior? And that is often why toddlers are bitten in the face, right? They copy adult behavior, and a dog does not see a toddler the same way that a dog sees an adult. This doesn't have anything to do with dominance. This has nothing to do with the dog needing to see your child as their boss. Your child is not your dog's boss. They're not. Your child is a child. Your dog does not see your child as an adult. They see you as an adult. And so you are the one that needs to be clear with your dog that your dog needs to respect. And they may not respect your child. And that's because your child is silly and unpredictable and sometimes scary. And so you need to step in and set appropriate boundaries, sometimes literally physical boundaries, such as baby gates and pens, to prevent your dog, again, like I said, from needing to take matters into their own hands, because they need to take care of themselves sometimes. And that is your job. It's not the dog's job to do that. So what should you do if you see your toddler or young child being inappropriate with the dog, being rough with the dog? You need to intervene calmly, okay? Try to address the situation without scolding your dog or scolding the child. Again, these are sort of normal behaviors, but again, if you can prevent them, that is much better than dealing with the aftermath of them. This is really important. It really helps to offer alternative outlets for your child's energy. So you can have sensory activities. If your child really wants to feel the dog's coat, what else can you provide to your child that will give them that same sensory experience? Can you go to the fabric store together? Get pieces of fuzzy material. Can you get touch and feel books for your child, or other kinds of physical things that your child can hold and manipulate in their hand? Stress balls and squishies are also great, options for things like that, so that they're not using your living dog as a squishy or something to pet, right? We want them to be petting things that won't bite them if they do it too rough. I do have a free guide. It's linked here in the show notes on how to help your kids to be kind and gentle with your dog. So I'd encourage you to go ahead and download that for free. The link again is in the show notes. You can get that at poochparenting.net/episode 87. It's also in the show notes of your favorite podcast listening player, probably where you're listening to this right now. So I hope that you found this helpful. I do just kind of want to normalize the fact that kids are often rough with dogs, and that's a normal phase. Your child is really trying to figure out the world, but please don't let them do that at your dog's expense. I hope you found this helpful. I hope it gave you some other ideas. Feel free to write to me, send me questions, reach out, and let me know if there are other podcast topics that you might want to hear about. And I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Pooch Parenting Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and leave a review. But even better yet, tell a friend. Are you in some moms groups, perhaps? Or maybe you're friendly with your pediatrician. Please let them know that resources like this exist, because the information that I share with my people goes beyond what most baby books offer, and a lot of parents need support. You'd be doing them a favor. Thanks again. Have a great day.